Are you ready for News and Brews, showcasing the innovations that make plastics manufacturing more efficient, sustainable, and eco-friendly? It's Plastech West correspondent Chris Lukey.
All right, folks, welcome back to the afternoon session of News and Brews here on day one of IME West. And what we have coming up, we're not only going to be talking about what's new in injection molding, but we're going to learn this individual's journey that got him to starting his own plastics company. I'm joined by Brandon Birchmeier, president of Birchmeier Plastic. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Birchmeier Plastics Solutions, I should say.
That's right.
Good to have you on board. And, you know, where we really like to start these conversations is getting to know our guests, as if we're having a brew with one another. So not too late for coffee, a little too late for a beer. But tell us your story. You know, how did you get started in injection molding with what I believe was the Chevy Impala? Is that correct?
To a certain degree. I started out of school. I went to Ferris State University, plastics engineering degree from there. And out of school, joined Johnson Controls. At the time, they made automotive interiors, and was able to launch a neat project at the time for the Chevy Impala, molding directly onto vinyl in the injection molding process, and eliminating the entire glue portion of the manufacturing process from that part. And lived in Canada for about a year and a half, so that was fun.
Really? Was that why you took the job, or did that happen as a result of the job?
Happened as a result of a job. Kind of found my way in that scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious. You know, you were doing automotive again at Johnson Controls. Why did you get out of the automotive industry after that into something completely different? We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. So 07, 08, the auto industry, if you ever watch it, is pretty up and down kind of industry, and I didn't want to be part of the next unknown or next part of layoffs, so I thought it would be wise to broaden my horizons a little bit. Also, living in Michigan and Canada most of my life, I wanted to go somewhere warm, and that's when I joined Rainbird in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, so tell me a bit more. So yeah, you wanted the warm weather, but how does one go from automotive to a company that's focused on water pumping?
That's kind of the beauty of injection molding, I think. It's the amount of products made through the same manufacturing process is just so huge. So you can bring your skills and talents and thoughts from the automotive sector. It is plastic parts, right? And now bringing it into the irrigation sector, again, which was plastic parts. They're just much smaller.
So I think this is the most exciting part of this initial line of questioning. How do you go from that to starting your own company?
Yeah, so after I left Rainbird, I joined Procter & Gamble in a division of them called Influx. And what I was doing there was developing kind of new injection molding technology, making the process more adaptable to like sustainable resins, using more recycled content. And from that, I went to a lot of trade shows like this. I've been all over the globe working with different molders, and I just got a wealth of experience that's hard to match, honestly. And I think I can bring a lot to the injection molding industry as a whole. I can walk in and be extremely comfortable with anything that they're making out of plastic and help them solve their problems.
I want to dig into the entrepreneurial journey a little bit more. Was there a moment, or was it a series of events that led up to you finally taking the jump?
I was motivated when the Influx division of P&G was downsized quite significantly. I always had this in the back of my head. I remember when I was in my early 20s buying a Consulting for Dummies book. So it always had been something I had considered. And then just when the company downsized, I saw an opportunity for myself. And my mom said, you should give this a go. And your mom's always your biggest supporter. So
yeah. Thanks, Mom.
Exactly. Thanks, Mom. So here I am. Yeah.
Well, in that case, let's segue into injection molding a little bit, because this is your area of expertise, despite going from water to automotive, I should say in the reverse order. But, you've been around the block in a couple of industries. But how do you optimize an injection molding process? And this is an area where in, let's say, news and brews fashion, as if we're talking about this over a beer. How do you simplify that for someone?
Yeah, be systematic in your approach. I think that's the key. I think where folks get into a lot of trouble is shooting from the hip or chasing a rabbit down a hole approach. It's very easy to kind of get lost in your own troubleshooting process, thought process. So what I try and instill in all my clients is you need to take a systematic approach. I give them kind of what that approach looks like. And then they can implement that into all their continuous improvement throughout their entire facility.
So you're a business owner. I want to get tactical for all the manufacturing leaders that are out there listening to this. What advice do you have for someone to know when it's time to create a system and how to create that system? Doesn't need to be the full playbook, but maybe some of those initial tips and tricks. Because I do think that's an area a lot of people struggle. They've got these ideas, they've seen it work on one project, but they don't necessarily know how to turn it into something scalable.
Yeah, and that's where you got to get organized and document what you do. Legacy knowledge in our industry is definitely knowledge, but it's harder to pass on. It's harder to transfer. And a lot of folks will put a lot of energy in the training of their individuals and then can lose them. So there's even an incentive, maybe, how much do I want to invest in my people, sort of thing. So by taking systematic approaches, developing a language of data that can permeate through the organization, and that's important as well, is you got to have data that matters and that every silo in your organization can understand and react to as well. So you got to create that language, and I think once you have that language and everyone is speaking that language, you can see some pretty significant dividends.
So if I'm a bit of an injection molding novice, but if I understand it correctly, part of what makes the process possible is having consistent raw materials. But if I understand you right, there is a mandate coming in industry to use recycled resins, which will cause the raw materials to fluctuate a little bit. So maybe give us a reality check there. Give us some of the background, then I'll follow up with the question I have in this area.
Yeah, I think we were spoiled for a while in this industry. 30 years ago, you expected your raw material to be very, very consistent, and you would set up a process that wouldn't have to adapt or adjust. It was a static process. Mm-hmm. And you would assume that all your virgin or raw resin you're using was very consistent as well. And if those things were true, then you could be successful. But our new reality is that we've got to start percolating recycled resin into much more of our products. And where that becomes a problem in the injection molding industry is how to adapt to that variation. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did a lot when I worked at Influx is, okay, if I can no longer trust my material, but I still need to make good parts, how do you now approach that process?
Right.
And that's where adaptive processing, using things like AI, machine learning, are really the future of what can be done to make our molding machines smarter.
So am I hearing you right that, because my next question is how do you deal with process control in that scenario? But I think you kind of answered it. You're going to use some of that adaptive learning and artificial intelligence to see what's going on in the process, to adjust as you go. Is that correct, or can you define that
ideally,
a
your
bit more for
process
us?
should be telling you something about your material.
Okay.
If you're able to read and document your process and understand how that changes over time, that should be giving you clues about what's happening to your raw material variation as well, so that you can get ahead of that stuff as you see it in your process.
Well, I know we're covering kind of a topics du jour here, and we're going to segue one more time in the 5 or so minutes we have left. You run a YouTube channel as well, and it's called Injection Molding, the Whiteboard Session, so very on brand. And I've seen a couple of those videos. They're very good. I'm curious, what early wins, because this is a relatively new channel, have resulted from starting this channel? I don't necessarily mean new business. I mean, could just be personal development, new skills. You can take this one wherever you want.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you kind of how it got started. I actually started writing a book and got through, 20% of the book. And then I read it, and it was extremely boring. And factual, but just boring. And it was my own writing. And I think that's the power of video and the power of YouTube is I can't get my enthusiasm because to me it's not boring. Mm-hmm. When I put it in a book, boy, it doesn't sound too exciting. But I feel like I can give that message more credence through my personality and my passion. And as far as the YouTube channel, what it's done for me is it's helped my networking tremendously. Self-marketing, for example, and it costs nothing. write a book, you get it published, there are costs. Making a YouTube video, there's not a whole lot of investment.
No, you're exactly right. And I'll put in a little plug for you. I've watched his videos. If you want to get more in-depth to injection molding and what's going on, check it out. Like I said, it's called Injection Molding, the Whiteboard Sessions, and it's very much like a college professor riffing on a topic that you know a ton about. So
yeah, and that was kind of the inspiration for it. I think there's something poetic about a college professor going on the whiteboard and riffing on a topic for an hour. I mean, you have to be a master of that knowledge. Mm-hmm. I've seen so much, I kind of hate PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think people have relied on those so much as conveying information and don't master the subject matter themselves.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What is one of the next topics you're most excited to talk about on that channel?
Actually, I have a new one coming out. It's going to be, kind of pushing back on injection molding machine development. Molding machines have changed over the years, and one of the things that happened about 20, 30 years ago was velocity control. And at the time, it was considered closed-loop control. I'm controlling the velocity of my screw. I have a closed-loop process. But it actually opened the loop to the mold. Those molding machines, because they're using just exactly what the operators tell them to do, the mold no longer is part of that equation. It doesn't provide any feedback. That's what a pressure-based process does, which actually molding machines of the old used to do quite well.
So one final question, and back to the entrepreneurship topic. What have you learned about running a business in just over the first 6 months or so that you've been running Birchmeier Plastics Solutions? Because it's a new business. I'm really curious to hear one of your top lessons that you've taken away from that experience so far.
I got to be more patient. Yeah, for sure. When the checks aren't coming in at a regular cadence, you get motivated pretty quickly to make things happen. But you also got to understand, there is patience to getting deals worked out, to figuring out, how I can provide the most benefit to a potential client. Yeah. And what that looks like, financially for them as well, and building that structure. But it's been a great learning experience. I'm where I am today versus where I was 6 months ago is quite a bit different. I've learned a ton, especially about just the business, having your own business overall. Yeah,
it's funny. I'm kind of in the same boat for you. I just started my own business roughly around the same time for all practical purposes. You learn very quickly how accounts payable typically works at a lot of spots. Exactly. So definitely a little bit of adjustment there. What is I'm going to give you a bonus question here. What is your big bet or big prediction for injection molding, or maybe the manufacturing industry more specifically as a whole, in the next 2 to 3 years?
I don't know if this is the next 2 to 3 years, but I think in the near future you're going to start seeing injection molding be more approachable.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is more hobby shop type machinery available. Okay. I think more folks getting into the industry.
Kind of like how 3D printing has become? Okay.
Exactly. You're starting to see smaller bench size injection molding machines now. For the hobbyists in mind. I love fishing, for example. Someday I want to make my own fishing lures. That's how I'm going to retire. Okay. At least in my head.
Have you done any hobby injection molding projects up to this point? You said fishing lures is on the horizon, but have you done any hobby ones yet?
I've played around in some of the labs I've worked in, but nothing actually in my barn. But to become, hopefully that becomes a reality in the near future.
Very fair. Well, hey, if you're out there, definitely check out Brandon's channel, Injection Molding, the Whiteboard Sessions. Get to know Birchmeier Plastics Solutions, and we'll be seeing you here with more on News and Brews very soon. Brandon, thanks so much for jumping on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.